I would now like to invite the member from the third-party opposition, Mr. Fraser, and the minister to speak for the next 20 minutes. Mr. Fraser, did you want to combine your time with the minister?
Yes, please.
Minister? That's okay?
Thanks.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Madam Chair. Minister, thanks for the work you do, and you have some very capable people around you, and that's good to see, and it's an important job, and one that we all need to take seriously as we move forward. You've mentioned a couple of ministries now where there is a GBA plus kind of component to them, and that was 4 of them. Am I correct in that? There's 4 ministries that have that GBA plus kind of embedded in them right now?
I believe it was 4 that have centers of responsibility. So that was labor, Service Alberta, status of women, and energy.
Right, and so I had a question around that. Particularly when we're thinking about girls and boys in primary education, from the very minute they're born. I mean, obviously that extends to mothers and fathers to be more aware of this issue. What are your plans to embed that inside education and advanced education, for that matter, to make sure that as the new generation comes on board, they can carry the torch, which hopefully eliminates the need that it's actually part of our culture, to promote women versus having to, educate them going backwards.
So we are going to be expanding our centers of responsibility, and our goal is to expand it to all ministries. And so education certainly being one of those, as well as advanced education. I fully expect that the curriculum review will have a gender-based analysis plus lens on that work that is being done. And so I expect those outcomes. Again, it's so hard. I mean, MLA here was asking for, the proof, and that's exactly the kind of thing that one might be looking for. But we have done a lot of internal work to ensure that those policies that are done anywhere that affect children certainly have the gendered lens on it. So we've established a cross-ministry committee on gender equality, and that is a community of practice for supporting ministries in their gender-based analysis plus accountability. But one of the things that we've certainly been partners with in advanced education and post-secondary students is to have some discussions around best practices and guidelines for sexual violence on campus, and addressing sexual violence on campus. So a lot of post-secondary institutions are currently in the phase of developing policies for their campuses, and there's certainly some campuses in Alberta that are out ahead of the game and have taken some learnings and best practices from other parts in the country, McEwen being perhaps leading the charge in this respect. But I recently met with the cause students and discussed with them how we can support their encouragement across university campuses and post-secondary institutions across the province, how we can encourage their efforts to develop sexual violence policies. But certainly if a governance structure within a university institution reached out to us to request GBA plus training, again, given that that's an arm's length government operation, we would certainly do our best to try and find it within our capacity to accommodate if we were available.
Very good, and that, obviously that's a tremendous goal to prevent and address gender-based violence and sexual violence on campuses or anywhere for that matter. Do you have a specific line item in your budget that supports? Do you have spending that supports that goal?
Absolutely. So we have a section under our gender policy strategy and innovation that's specifically a unit that specifically addresses violence against women and girls. And the total spend for that section is $407,000. And that's a component of the portrait cost. And in addition to that, there is a United Nations Safe Cities initiative that the city of Edmonton has applied for and been successful to be part of that United Nations program. And that is an additional $57,000 towards that initiative. But, you know, violence against women and girls, it's one of those things that certainly can also be addressed by encouraging leadership, that can be addressed by dealing with economic issues as well. And that's part of the reason that those are our three mandate areas, is because they're so interrelated.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad that you referenced the leadership, and particularly increasing women's leadership and in their democratic participation. Mm-hmm. I was just wondering also, again, and I'm just assuming that it likely follows under that strategy innovation. Do you have a line item that also supports those two initiatives?
Absolutely. So we have a unit for women in leadership and democratic participation. We have 3 full-time employees in that unit, and the total spend for that is $431,000.
Okay. And again, just kind of a little bit around the leadership. As certainly you, when you were first elected, and when I was first elected, when you come into this place, there's lots to learn about Alberta, its industries, its agriculture, and environment, and a lot of things. And we quite often get the kind of the 101 version of agriculture, mm-hmm. oil and gas, and those sort of things. Is there any initiative right now to support just outside of the ministries, but to provide the GBA plus training for legislators right here, since we're the ones that go back to constituents to have a better understanding of that? Is there an initiative there to do that?
Certainly it's something that I've had some chats with my department about, and we even got to the point of canvassing available dates, but wrenches kind of got thrown into the plans, so it's something that I am happy to turn my mind back to if there's an appetite. Absolutely.
Very good. So again, just kind of going back to the overall, you talked about basically GBA Plus is an international tool that you've adopted. Is there a specific organization that you adopted it from? And when you look to certain regions, is there a region and or an organization that's modeled everything for you? Is there one specific thing that you can point to? Again, so that when we get the questions, can we reference people as to certainly when Albertans are looking for outcomes, we can say, if you look at this organization, this would ideally maybe be the goal.
Certainly we've taken our lead from Status of Women Canada with respect to the gender-based analysis plus tool. But I think you're getting at, is there a utopia somewhere in the world? There isn't. No matter where you look in the world, women are disadvantaged. There's certainly areas that are doing better than others on certain metrics. And one of those, just off the top of my head, would be Sweden. So one of the things that they did, though this is not at all within provincial purview, is provide parental leave specifically for the, to use cisgendered language, but is for the father, that couldn't be transferred between mom and dad. So that they are confident in their analysis has contributed to improvement of gender equity. And so there's definitely initiatives that we know will improve gendered outcomes.
Right.
Yeah.
Just kind of on the idea of the public service members and helping them achieve competencies around this issue. Maybe you can speak a little bit to some of the training and how that might evolve over time. And again, just, my previous experience in the union oftentimes takes on a role and responsibility in training and safety and those sort of things to help their members. Has there been a discussion with the large public sector unions to add this to maybe some of their modules and some of their additional training, and or to bodies like Carno or the Alberta College of Paramedics? Again, these institutions that are specifically, their role is to educate the practitioner and to have this as a part of them. So that's kind of three questions in one, so I'll let you go for a bit.
Yeah. So we, again, due to capacity issues, haven't had the opportunity to work with the unions in the manner that you're talking about. Again, it's an opportunity that we would love if we had, additional resources to be able to provide those services. But that being said, there are definitely opportunities for private sector or union environments, but professional regulators to get that training within their own capacity and get that training within their own infrastructure to be able to provide that to their members. So in really no different a way than we started, other organizations or groups would be able to get that capacity in-house.
Right. So again, just kind of back to the, you've spoken to not having the capacity yet perhaps to train and or partner yet with some of these groups. So can you kind of give me your vision as how you would see this evolve, so that maybe this time next year we would be able to see certain things of a line item of how many people have been trained and outcomes, to know kind of what you mentioned before in terms of what works and what doesn't work, to provide some accountability and be able to highlight the good work in the ministry.
So certainly many of my goals are reflected in my business plan, and our target for the number of Government of Alberta staff who've attended GBA Plus training session for 2018-19 is 6,000, and so for 17-18 it was 2,500, so we were pretty good there, but yeah, our target is 6,000. Again, when you look at the size of the Alberta Public Service, that is still percentage-wise a fairly small number of the Alberta Public Service, and so ultimately our penultimate goal is to have all of the Alberta Public Service trained in GBA Plus analysis. But we're only in our second year of being a full ministry, and so you got to start somewhere. But our 2018-19 goal is to hit 6,000. But that's not the full story. Our number of centers of responsibility, so that would be, like I said, they help grow our capacity, which is fabulous. Once our capacity is at a certain, once our capacity is grown to be a certain level with inside ministries, perhaps then we can start turning our focus more outwardly. We in our last 16-17 we wanted to hit 4, and we've done that, and so our target for our target for 17-18 is 8.
Okay.
So after that, it doubles again to 16. So when we can get those centers of responsibility built up, it will help to snowball the training, certainly, as we get more hands on deck.
Right. So so do you have kind of a basically a strategy or a flow chart that helps you maintain consistency throughout departments? I guess what I'm saying, if you've trained a particular group, how it flows down, because, and I'm speaking to just a little bit to what the member from Chestermere Rockview was speaking about in terms of what about all the contracted service providers that's contracted through the GOA to make sure that they meet the standard, so that, to use your terms in terms of throwing wrenches into things, you have one particular ministry and a group, but they use a contracted service provider that doesn't have that GBA plus training, that stops that consistency from happening.
Yeah, that's certainly a difficulty at this point because we don't have the capacity built up either, financially from a resources point of view within status of women specifically, or within our centers of responsibility to be able to expand that work. Certainly this is something that we, again, would love to be able to do, and confident that one day we will be able to get there. With respect to measuring and tracking individuals within the public service and ensure that we have folks that remain trained because people switch around. We are certainly in the process of doing that tracking to ensure that when people move, their replacements are also trained.
Right. Yeah. I guess I have just one more question here for this rest of the time. Do you think it is possible in your ministry to create the capacity at the very least to kind of have an Alberta-made document that elected officials and their staff could have throughout the caucuses, so that we can continue with some of that work and maintain some of that consistency? Do you think that that's a possible thing?
Well, at this point, it's something that we point to because the resources already exist, so you don't necessarily always need to reinvent the wheel. And so the resources for a basic training exist online with Status of Women Canada. And so you can go through an online module. Really, the best kind of training is one that is done in person, where you can have a dialogue with the trainer, and you can go through examples and that kind of thing. So that's where you would get it to be a little bit more specific, or that you might be able to ask questions and play around with examples that are specific to your line of work or your experiences. I'm not attempting at all to discount it. It's a very solid and very good tool that exists online already through Status of Women Canada. So that's where we point people. Absolutely.
Right. And actually, sorry, I do have another question, as I think of it. Sure. There's been some talk about labor changes. Have you been in discussions, and you said that GBA Plus has been embedded in labor. Do you anticipate any changes to the labor code that facilitates the GBA Plus model?
I would anticipate that all of the changes to the labor code have gone through a GBA Plus analysis.
Okay. All right.
So.
I was wondering if you could touch on regarding program, practice, and policy changes for gender-based analysis. What's your strategy for reviewing those policies and practices to build in gender-based analysis?
So are you talking about the training program, or?
Yeah, I think the training program and just the GBA program, the practice, policy changes as you move forward. Is there a gender-based analysis for that?
Oh, for tracking outcomes, or?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to actually turn to my deputy minister to speak to how we track the effectiveness of our GBA Plus. Yeah, I mean, certainly there's some outcomes within the business plan that are clear in terms of how many people we trained.
Is there a strategy, I suppose, kind of on a quarterly basis, bi-yearly sort of thing, where you're tracking the progress on such an important issue? Because as you said, one person kind of grows the knowledge and so on as you kind of develop into ministries. Like, how close are you tracking that in terms of the outcomes?
Yeah, so in terms of the performance on this measure, we certainly are tracking this, largely on outcomes based. And so part of that, one of those indicators is how many people we've trained, how many centers of responsibility. But as I mentioned previously, as of October 28th, 2016, all cabinet reports have required a gender and intersectional analysis on them. And so it allows us to conveniently within our department see the work that's being done by other departments and how the effectiveness of that training through that department. So it would allow us to catch anything and then be able to speak with that center of responsibility or the officials responsible for the GPA plus analysis to be able to follow up and ensure quality of process, right?
Right.
I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, so would it be fair to say, though, that there's kind of, when you're looking at outcomes, you have the number of people trained, but the real outcome you're wanting to see is change in attitude, right? Mm-hmm. And how difficult is that to track? Has there been any indication by Status of Women Canada around, how difficult that may be, particularly when you go to, obviously, different groups, and different heritages, those sort of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's difficult to track societal beliefs. Certainly there's been studies done on sort of taking a point in time from a small, sized group. We don't have the luxury of being able to afford that kind of research or analysis, but so we're very outcomes based in our measurements, and I can definitely tell you that we track things like how many Government of Alberta policy frameworks and strategies have included a gender-based analysis in their development, and of the ones released in 16-17, it was about 25%. So we do know the quantity of what's being done and who is trained in this area.
Right.
And we can also track outcome metrics like women's participation in the labor force.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to see improved outcomes for women in many of the metrics that we're reporting on. Women in positions of leadership on boards,
Right.
For example. Women in elected positions, women in terms of their wage earnings, right? And how many women are in the workforce? Whether how these policy shifts and cultural and societal views are affecting those things.
Okay. Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister.
Thanks.